it kind of made me realize, hey, maybe I do care about my life after all, because of how scared I was to die from the infection.
Hello, welcome to Recovery Demystified, a show where we explore our relationship to substances from a radical, non-religious, and empowering lens. Our sobriety is not a purity contract. It is an invitation to become curious about ourselves and find our own unique paths to growth and healing. If you've been questioning the role of alcohol or drugs in your life and haven't found the resources that you need, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hello, welcome back to Recovery Demystified. My name's Early. I'm so happy to have y'all here today. I've said it once and I'll say it again. Statistics show that 75% of people recover from their addictions, which means that you are highly likely to recover. And in fact, I think you are going to recover because you're here listening to an addiction recovery podcast, which I think puts you way ahead of the game. So I'll link that scientific study in the show notes if you're interested in reading more about it. But 75% of people recover, and that's going to be you. So if you've been struggling, keep your head up, keep on trying, and you're going to get there at some point. If this podcast helps you out at all, please help me out. I've got a link for the Patreon in the description. There's going to be some exclusive content coming up on there just as soon as I can figure out how to do that. And if you cannot afford a few dollars a month for the Patreon, there's a couple other things that you could do that would be most excellent. If you could rate and review the podcast on Apple and Spotify, that would help me out a lot. And of course, recommend this show to a friend who you think needs to hear this message. And I got a really sweet review on Apple recently that says, "For a weirdo like me, Early brings a compassionate heart to asking hard questions around substance use and its impacts. A wide range of knowledge about and techniques for working toward recovery are shared in an approachable and judgment-free way. This podcast is opening up my thinking around addiction, mental health issues, and other complexities of being human. As someone who has been in various stages of addiction and recovery from teenage to midlife, I'm deeply grateful to Early and their guests for opening up new lines of light." So thank you for leaving such a sweet review, and yeah, those are some ways that you could help me out, so thank you. And there is also a merch store in the description too if you just want some Toad swag. There's some t-shirts and hoodies and stuff down in there, so check it out. Alright, today I have another interview episode. It is my friend Jacob. We met at our support group, the local Recovery Demystified support group, and actually several months before he ever showed up to that, he and his band played our benefit show. Last year we had a benefit show on 420, and yeah, I remember meeting his mom, and his mom was like, "That's my son," pointing to some like 7-foot tall man across the room, and I was like, "Oh, okay, neat." And little did I know that later we'd get to know each other pretty well. And you know, normally I wouldn't talk about the people that come to our groups, except that he talks about it in the episode. But yeah, his story is interesting. He's one of very few people that comes on the show and is like, you know, not that much bad stuff happened in childhood, but we talk a lot about mental health struggles like autism, ADHD, and anxiety that perhaps are ancestral trauma and epigenetic in nature, which I think is a really interesting topic to explore. And it's basically like if you're born with some kind of problem and you're like, there's no trauma, and like, where is this even coming from? Like, perhaps it is because you have altered DNA because of your ancestors had that same type of altered DNA. And since they never healed from their trauma, they passed it down to you. And there's like a long spiritual tradition of understanding this and a newer scientific understanding of epigenetics. So I think it's like pretty cool that we're able to explore that in this episode. And then also we talk about how chronic pain can affect a person's likelihood of getting an addiction. And it's always really interesting to me to hear how different substances affect different people. Like when I tried opiates, nothing happened really. I mean, like basically I just got tired and itchy and I was like, well, this is boring. Like when does the good part happen? And when Jacob describes trying opiates for the first time, it was like all of his problems went away and he felt euphoria. So, yeah, it's just very curious to me that the same substance with two different humans can produce such a drastically different effect. And I think it has a lot to do with how trauma, both our own and our inherited trauma, affects the structures of our brain and our literal DNA. And also, Jacob's story is really interesting because he has a long stint of being on Suboxone and a couple of like very serious heart infections. And we actually get into him having to have open heart surgery while on Suboxone, which meant that the pain medications for the surgery didn't work at all. So an open heart surgery with no pain medications. It's one of the fucking craziest things I've ever heard. And it's just fucking amazing that he made it through that and survived. So anyway, lots of good stuff in this episode. I hope y'all get something out of it. And yeah, without further ado, here's my interview with Jacob. Hello, Jacob. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Will you start by introducing yourself to the audience? Let them know your pronouns and just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm Jacob. Mainly I go by he, him, but they, them is also fine. I am 29 years old and I am a professional musician and teacher. I play drums and teach drums. I'm currently in 4 bands. And I have around 8 students. That's most of what I do with my life at this point.
Very cool. Yeah, it's like a sort of a Fayetteville joke that there's only like 2 drummers in all of Fayetteville, and they play in like all 30 different bands. So.
Yeah, there's more than 2, but all the drummers that I know play in multiple bands. Yeah,
they sure do. All right. Well, we're here to talk about your story with addiction and recovery. So I'm curious what it was like for you to be a little kid, maybe some of your first encounters with substances, when it got bad, and then ultimately how you got into recovery. So start wherever you'd like.
Okay. So my childhood was fairly normal, actually. I had very loving and supportive parents that there was some conflict later on in my life with them, but for the most part as a child, they were great. Let's see. I did, however, when I was very young, like 5 or 6, I went to the Schmieding Center, I think it's called, and got tested for mental illness because I was, having trouble in school and stuff. And they gave me 2 possible diagnoses and 1 for sure one. They said I probably have ADHD and autism, and I definitely have severe anxiety.
And that was at what age did you say?
Like 5 or 6. So it was already visible at that point.
Do you remember going through the test, and do you remember how you felt around that age?
No, I don't have much memory of that point.
Yeah. Did you have any early childhood traumas or any way to explain having such severe mental issues as such a young kid?
The best way to explain it is probably genetics. Everyone on my mom's side of the family has anxiety to some degree, and some of them also have other problems to go along with that. So it's likely genetics. There wasn't any big traumas that early in my life. I did go through a tough phase when I was, I don't remember for sure, but I think around 10 or 11, my mom had breast cancer, and that was really hard on our family.
Damn, yeah, that was probably super scary to deal with as a kid at that age.
Yeah, I don't think I processed it very well either, because luckily they caught it early enough that we kind of thought the whole time she's probably going to be okay.
Yeah.
So I just kind of blew it off, which it's a kid. I didn't know any better, but I should have spent more time actually processing it. Because even though we did kind of know she was going to be okay, she still had to go through chemo and everything, and it was just really hard.
Yeah, dang, that sounds super hard. I'm curious, in adulthood, you're talking about how a lot of folks in your family have anxiety and that you think it's genetic. Have you ever learned about epigenetics or intergenerational trauma and how we can inherit the traumatized nervous systems from our ancestors? Yes,
and I think that plays a big role for me. I am ethnically Jewish, and historically there's been a lot of trauma to ethnic Jews. So I think that probably does play a role.
Yeah. Were you medicated as a kid?
I was not medicated for anxiety, weirdly enough, even though that was my main diagnosis. I did later get medicated for ADHD, and I think that helped a lot. In second grade, halfway through the year, I skipped into third grade because I was kind of a troublemaker, and they thought skipping a grade would fix that because what was happening was I was finishing all my work early and then bothering other people because I didn't have anything to do. So I skipped a grade. That solved a lot of problems. I was a lot more challenged. And yeah, then later on, after elementary and middle school and stuff, in high school, by that point, I had found a passion in music. I was in the percussion section in the school band. My junior year of high school, in addition to band, I also joined the orchestra and learned cello. But it was around that point where my, I guess, mental issues started showing themselves in greater force. I started struggling with grades because it was very, very hard for me to actually study.
Do you remember why that was?
I've always had this hyperfixation on my interests, and it's very hard to get myself to commit to doing something that isn't the top interest in my mind at that very moment. I think that's both an ADHD and an autism thing.
Yeah.
So, like, for example, one of my interests when I was younger was yo-yoing. So instead of doing my homework, I would just be in my room yo-yoing. Or instead of doing another thing I'm interested in is physics. So instead of doing my English homework, I'd be studying physics. And it was just very hard to get myself to actually concentrate on what I was supposed to concentrate on. The concentration itself wasn't a big issue. Like, typical ADHD can't focus. That wasn't as big of an issue. It was that I was concentrating on the wrong things.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you remember how you felt as a kid when you started having those experiences?
Yeah, it played into my anxiety. It just made me more anxious because I would, procrastinate on assignments, and then when it gets really close to being due, I can't get it done in time, and then I have to be really anxious about walking into class and telling the teacher, oh, I didn't do it. And it just added to my anxiety, which was already a problem.
Yeah, that sounds really hard and super unmanageable. Was there any addiction in your family?
At that time, not really. Skipping forward to more recent years, my dad has had a problem with alcohol. He's sober now. So some form of addiction maybe runs in the family, but not any huge issues when I was growing up.
Do you remember the first time you were exposed to any substances, when you became aware that mind-altering substances existed?
Yes and no. So I didn't really think of them as mind-altering substances because I had a very, maybe unique to most people, experience with alcohol actually when I was 13, because I grew up Jewish. At Shabbat and at Pesach, which is Passover, and other holidays, it's common to drink wine. So there was wine available at the places we were celebrating these holidays. And so when I was around 13, I started drinking wine, not regularly, but just on holidays. And yeah, that was my first exposure to any sort of substance.
Do you remember how it made you feel?
Most of the time, it didn't make me feel anything different because I didn't have enough. But a couple times, me and a friend of mine would kind of sneak extra. Mm-hmm. And it really just made me feel good but sleepy.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you were trying alcohol at the cultural celebrations, but not getting super hard into it. Do you remember your first time dabbling in any other substances that became a problem for you in the future?
Yes, so the next thing I tried was probably weed in late high school. Never had a problem with it. Still to this day, I don't really have a problem with it. It wasn't until early college, when I was 18, I think, that I started actually becoming somewhat addicted to anything.
So you graduated high school even through all the challenges?
Yes. Yeah. I graduated, for all the problems I had, I actually had a decent GPA, surprisingly. And I really rode into college on my ACT scores. I had always been a good test taker, so I had really high ACT scores. So I got into the University of Arkansas on some not great but decent scholarships.
And then substance use changed somewhere around then?
Yes. So let's see. Around my second semester of college, I started going to more parties. And that led to more drinking, more weed smoking. Still not a problem, but I was getting more into that lifestyle of substances becoming normalized. I started smoking cigarettes around that time, too. That was probably the first thing I was ever really addicted to was cigarettes. And still to this day, I can't quit cigarettes. But towards the end of my second semester, I'll preface this by saying that by that time, I had already started to experience physical pain issues in addition to my mental issues. Primarily my lower back and my knees. I had pretty severe pain issues in those. I have 2 bulging discs in my lower back, and I have what's called chondromalacia in my knees, which means the kneecap and the knee joint don't track right, so they rub on the cartilage. And so at some point, a friend of mine had some Percocets and offered me one, and I took it, and it was just magic. It made everything disappear. My pain disappeared. My anxiety disappeared. At that point, I had also started to get a little bit depressed. The depression disappeared. The OCD type tendencies disappeared. They just fixed everything magically. In addition to fixing everything, I also felt like waves of euphoria, even though it was only a 5 milligram Percocet. And at that point, it was like my favorite thing. I wasn't obviously physically addicted the moment I did it. That's a myth that you get physically addicted the second you do a drug. But mentally, I was already hooked.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine that sense of just complete, utter relief from everything that was plaguing you. And then on top of relief, also feeling euphoria, of fucking course you're going to do that again. I do have a question, which is that the chronic pain, did that have a physiological origin, or do you think it had to do with chronic stress that's held in the body?
Maybe a little bit of both. I think physiologically, I am very tall, and I've had a doctor say that, they don't know for sure, but that it's possible that when I was growing so fast that some of my joints and connective tissue couldn't keep up. And so I have, compared to the rest of my body, weak joints and connective tissue. So that's a possibility. But it's also definitely possible that the stress also led to it.
Yeah. So you had the 5 milligram Percocet and all the fireworks went off for you. What happened after that?
After that, I continued to go down the rabbit hole of the, party lifestyle. Around maybe between a few months and a year after that, I tried some other drugs for the first time, like LSD, mushrooms, cocaine. Just typical, LSD and mushrooms aren't really party drugs, but typical, I don't know how to describe it. Just the kind of drugs that people do when they're in that scene.
Yeah, and just experimenting. And at some point when you're in your teens or 20s and you start learning about altered states of consciousness, at some point it's I don't know, sort of just exploration of what it fucking means to be human.
Yeah, and I got really into that.
Yeah.
And I rationalized all of my drug use away by saying exactly that I was exploring my brain, basically.
Mm-hmm. And it can be both things, too. You know what I mean? Those consciousness expanding moments aren't erased by the fact that we're also at some point harming ourselves.
Yeah, no, and a lot of the drug use, like the LSD and mushrooms and DMT and stuff, I don't really regret many of those. Some of my experiences on the psychedelics, I think, have actually been a net positive. But some of the other drugs I was doing eventually became a very big negative, of course. So at this time, I was still not often, but occasionally doing Percocets or hydros or, small dose opiates. whenever they were around. I wasn't really seeking them out, but if they were available, I'd take them.
Did it hit the same every time, or were you just chasing that the first time and it never got quite as good?
It depended. And I still to this day have no idea what the circumstances have to be to achieve that first time high feeling. But I did achieve that a few other times. And it seemed just random. Like sometimes I would take it and it wouldn't hit me the same way. Other times I would take them and it did feel like that first time again. And I still don't know what leads to which one.
Yeah. Did you always sort of feel like you were hoping for that, though?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
And then shortly after that, I started also not really heavily abusing, but somewhat abusing my own ADHD medication. I was never a huge fan of uppers, possibly because I had been prescribed them for so long at that point that they didn't make me feel euphoric or anything. They just kind of were normal. Mm-hmm. But I still, I realized that for most people they are a party drug. And because I was so into partying and stuff, I definitely started, abusing my medication a little bit. And then skip forward another few months, and that's when I really started to go more down the rabbit hole of opiates. It was getting more and more regular that we would have Percocets or Hydros available, partially because a friend of mine had a deal with somebody who had a prescription where he would buy her prescription off of her, and then we'd either sell some of it or take some of it or both. And so it started becoming more and more often that I would have access to Percocets specifically. And it was kind of a slow slide, but over the course of like half a year, it went from once every month to once every week to like 3 or 4 times a week at this point. And also the doses were increasing. Instead of taking 1, I was taking 2 or 3, maybe occasionally even 4, which compared to when I was really bad, that's still nothing. But at that point, it was a lot.
Did you think anything about it at the time? Like, oh shit, I'm needing more and more. Like, this could be going down a bad road. Or what was your thought process?
Again, I was still rationalizing it as part of exploring my mind, and also another rationalization popped up around that time, because around that time is also when I switched from purely doing classical music to playing in local rock bands. And so I also just attributed the drug use as just part of the rock and roll lifestyle. I don't know. Yeah. And it was like, every famous rock and roller has done drugs at some point, so this is my time.
Yeah, it's interesting how many different mental rationalizations the addicted voice in our heads can give us to try to just make it seem normal, even when eventually we know it definitely isn't. And actually, one of the earlier interviews I did was with another guy named Jacob, who was also a drummer. Did you listen to that one?
No, I didn't see that one.
It's way in the back catalog, but he ended up with cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome from like hitting the dab rig just all day long for however many years, or like he did some hard drugs, but yeah, he got way into all the like weed concentrates until it like landed him in the emergency room and he almost died. But I'm just interested now that it's like, oh, it's kind of funny. I've had two Jacobs that are both drummers and that have both struggled with addiction. What are the chances? But yeah, it definitely makes sense. It's like a huge cultural seal of approval for using substances is that rock star lifestyle, or for some reason it's impressed into us that it's like aids in creativity. When it's like, it's sort of just aiding in like shutting down different parts of your brain. You know what I mean? But was that part of it for you as well?
Yeah, I've found that in some ways it does aid creativity, but it's kind of a fake creativity. So real creativity, in my opinion, comes from emotion. If you're feeling strong emotions, that's the best time to write music. And taking substances kind of falsely creates strong emotions. So you do have that strong emotion leading to better creativity, but it's not because of something that's happening in your life. It's because of the substance you're taking. So it's kind of a false creativity. That's my opinion.
Makes sense, like inauthentic or something.
Yeah, inauthentic. That's good.
So how was it affecting your ability to like stay in school, in college?
At that point, it wasn't really affecting my ability, but about a year and a half down the road, it started to.
So what happened in between taking 3 or 4 a few times a week and things really going downhill?
Okay, so I got to remember this.
Sometimes it's hard to remember when we're all fucked up.
I remember everything that happened. I just don't remember the order of everything.
Yeah.
Let's see. So, okay, first off, I'll start by saying my physical pain progressively got worse over time, even though I was self-medicating with opiates. There's this thing with opiates where when you take them, the pain goes away. But when you don't take them, the pain is worse than if you had never taken them, because your body gets so used to being medicated that when you're not medicated, you not only have the pain that was already there, but your body's like, you need medication, I'm going to make the pain worse. So my pain was getting worse and worse, and money became more of a situation as I was buying more and more pills and also spending money on other drugs for partying, like cocaine and stuff like that. So around that time, a friend and I were messing around on the dark web, and we found the option to order some harder stuff. And so that was the first time we ordered it, and that was the first time I tried heroin. I skipped some stuff. In between this, I didn't go from 4 Percocets to heroin. In between this, I was slowly graduating to like Oxy 30s and then taking 2 Oxy 30s and that sort of thing. But yeah, eventually we ordered heroin for the first time. At that point, there was no IV use. I was just snorting it or smoking it. And that was also occasional at the time. For the most part, I was still just doing Percocets or Hydros, but occasionally we would order heroin.
Was it like a financial decision? I feel like I've heard that a lot of times with folks that get into opiates where it's like the pills just start costing too fucking much and then they turn to heroin simply because it's cheaper. Was that the case for you, or was it curiosity, or like what brought you to the dark web and buying the heroin?
It was both. The original purchase was probably mostly curiosity, but once we realized like how good it was compared to the pills and how much cheaper it was, it became, like, oh, this is the obvious choice. We should just do this.
Was there anything going through your mind at that time? Like, I'm experimenting with heroin. Like, are any like alarm bells or flashing red lights or anything, or just still rationalization?
Still rationalization. At that point, I was experimenting with pretty much any drug known to man. And I would also mix them very dangerously. I would take cocktails of like, a little bit of Molly, a tab of acid, a Xanax, and 3 Percocets, like all at once. At parties especially.
Did you stay standing?
For the most part. Sometimes I ended up on the couch.
Dang. And yeah, no questioning at this phase?
I mean, in the back of my mind, yes. I knew that I was probably going down a bad road. But the rationalization just kept getting stronger and stronger of like, yeah, this is you. You're the person who experiments with substances and tries to, like we were talking about, be creative and yeah. And on top of that, the initial allure of the pills in the first place was still a very strong thing. Like it still made all of my mental and physical health issues disappear.
Yeah, no freaking wonder you're going to seek that out. That makes perfect sense to me. So you're out getting heroin on the dark web and smoking it or snorting it and still rationalizing. There's a little voice in the back of your head that's questioning it. What happened after that?
So around that time is when it started to cause a lot of problems with university. And it wasn't, to be fair, it wasn't just the drugs. A lot of it was the physical pain. I was having to miss a lot of classes because I couldn't get out of bed. Like if I didn't have the pills to take away the pain, I could barely get out of bed because of my back sometimes. And I was missing a lot of classes due to that. So it became more and more of a struggle because not only was I missing a lot of classes, but because I was missing classes, I was getting behind. So I'd have to do extra work to catch up and the work that they were assigning currently. And it just kept snowballing. And eventually I just had to drop like half my classes. And then a semester or two after that, I just dropped out entirely.
Damn. Did you ever go to the doctor for the pain?
Yes. Oh, I guess I skipped that part. So probably maybe half a year after I first tried Percocets, I did get a prescription for hydros. And at the time, for the first couple weeks, I was using them as prescribed. And then the temptation got the best of me, and I started taking extra. And after a few refills, the doctor's like, I can't do this anymore. You're going through them too fast.
Dang, busted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it sounds like just having that chronic pain and then something that gives it just like blanketed relief. 2 + 2 is 4. So what happened? What happened next?
So I dropped out and began to work. I just worked in a kitchen at a like fast food place, a pizza place. And it was around that time where it started to get bad, the drug use. Around that time was when I started injecting. The main reason for that was, I guess it's 2 reasons. Is one, it just seemed like the natural progression to me for whatever messed up reason. Mm-hmm. It's like you're not getting the same hit off of snorting the heroin anymore. Maybe we should up the ante and start injecting it. That plus, at this point, money was a big issue because I wasn't on my school scholarships anymore. I had to work for my money. And so I knew that injecting gave you more bang for your buck. So that's how it started. And like every upping of the ante that I've described, it started pretty weekly. I was only injecting maybe once a week. And then it starts to ramp up. And eventually I get to the point where every single day I'm injecting something. If I can get opiates, I'm injecting opiates. If I can't get opiates, it's something else like cocaine or just something to not be sober. At that point, I had reached the stage where I could not stand to be sober.
What did it feel like when you were sober or in withdrawals or whatever?
Well, withdrawals are withdrawals. They're one of the worst things on earth. But when I was in points where I was sober but not withdrawing, it just all of my physical and mental health issues would just kind of boil over the top and I would just start to fall apart.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you would have stretches of sobriety, how long would it last?
Anywhere from a few weeks to a few months. I think the longest I went in the middle of my addiction was like 6 or 7 months. The second or third time that I tried to actually get clean, I managed 6 or 7 months before I fell back into it.
What motivated you to try to quit for the first time?
At that point, I knew that it was bad. I mean, it's pretty simple. At that point, I knew that I was going down a really bad road. Later on, I stopped caring. But at that point, that's why I tried to quit the first couple times.
Was it just like, oh shit, I'm a heroin addict and that's kind of fucked? Or was it like, did you have like outside negative repercussions?
I mean, there was some outside negative repercussions. Like I was constantly broke because I was spending all my money on drugs. I was selling drugs to make money to buy drugs. So there was a lot of risk. Somehow I never got arrested. I still don't understand how. But, so I was worried about the law. I had dropped out of school, although, again, that was mainly due to the pain issues. But the drugs played a role.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there was negative repercussions. But it was mostly what you said, like, oh, shit, I'm a heroin addict now.
What was it like the first time that you tried to quit?
It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, actually, because at that time I still wasn't a heavy user. I was using something almost every day, but most days it was a pretty light dose. So the withdrawals were shitty, but I was able to get through them. But the worst part was just being sober. It was hard to handle. And eventually that caught up to me and I started using again.
Did you have any like mental health care at that time?
I don't remember when I started seeing a psychiatrist and a therapist. It might have been around this time, and it might have been a little bit later. I don't really remember.
Yeah. When you made it that like 6 or 7 months off of drugs, what was keeping you afloat? What was keeping you going?
Probably my music career, which even at that stage, it hadn't really progressed much. I was still mostly just playing in very small, unknown local bands, but I was loving it. It was like the only thing that I enjoyed because, like I said, being sober was hell. But if I was playing music, it wasn't quite as bad. So I think that's what kind of got me through it.
Yeah. Did you have any other like coping skills? Were you learning about addiction at all, or was it just sort of like white knuckling it?
Yeah, just white knuckling it.
Yeah, that's unfortunately seems to always be bound to fail. I've heard people say that willpower is like a muscle, and you can make it stronger, but it's always going to get tired eventually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you're going back and forth on and off of heroin, having moments of sobriety months at a time. What happened after that, like 6 or 7 months? Like, what do you know why you decided to use again? It was just everything got too overwhelming?
Yeah, that, and I found a new friend group that they all used heroin. So I guess I should back up a little bit. I did start to see a psychiatrist and a therapist shortly before this. And that was mainly because, well, no, it was shortly after that. Yeah. So wait, was it? I'm sorry.
It's all good.
So what I'm trying to remember is when I've had 2 psychotic episodes, and I'm trying to remember when the first one was, because that was also a big thing in my life. I think the first one was while I was sober. No, I wasn't. Okay, so I got some stuff wrong now that I'm remembering. So that new friend group that I mentioned, I did not start using again because of them. I started using prior to meeting them. I started using again because an old friend of mine, the one that I used to buy off the dark web with, kind of came back into my life and we started ordering again. Shortly after that, I had my first psychotic episode. I was kind of loosely diagnosed with like maybe schizophrenia or something. Now we know it was likely anxiety-induced psychosis. And I had one other episode, like a year or 2 after that one. But yeah, so I had that, started seeing a psychiatrist and a therapist, and then a few months later, I was hanging out with another musician. I mentioned, like, damn, I wish I could find some opiates. And he's like, oh, I'm friends with a bunch of dudes who know where to get that. So I went over to their place. The dealer was actually hanging out at the house, so I was able to buy some stuff right away. Pulled out a needle that I had. That was the beginning of the end, really.
Off to the races.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you are willing to share about the anxiety-induced psychosis, what it felt like and what you went through, and like, did you go inpatient somewhere?
I did not go inpatient somewhere. I was really afraid of hospitals in general, but specifically mental hospitals. I was very, very afraid. That might have been part of the psychosis, that I thought that they were trying to put me in a hospital and lock me up. But no, I ended up just basically hiding out at my parents' house until I started getting better, which was a mix of just calming down and having less anxiety and medication.
Do you remember what the psychosis consisted of?
It started, I remember very, very clearly that it started with just, I guess, a sense of impending doom. I remember I ran across the street. I was living at the time with a couple friends on a street with a lot of our other friends lived on the same street. So I ran across the street to a friend's house and was like, hey, something bad's going to happen. And I couldn't tell him what, but I was just like, something bad's going to happen. I can feel it. And from there, it progressed to paranoia and, pretty typical psychotic symptoms. When I was at my parents' house, I was basically curled up on a ball on the couch, kind of afraid to move even.
Because you were worried people were going to come put you in an institution?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's super scary. I'm sorry you had to go through that. Were you on drugs or off drugs at that time?
That was in a phase where I was kind of on and off. During the episode, I'm pretty sure, because I was at my parents' house most of the time, so I don't think I was doing any drugs during the episode. but it's possible that I had done some shortly before. I just don't remember.
Do you think it had anything to do with withdrawals?
It could have. Yeah, the first time could have. The second time was during a sober stint. But yes.
What happened the second time?
It was similar, but just less intense. I actually didn't end up going. Let me try to remember. No, that was the first time. Okay, so the second time is the time that I've been talking about. The first time was during a sober stint. I didn't end up going to my parents' house. I just kind of hid out in my room for a few days.
But it was the same deal, just like a sense of impending doom and thinking that people were going to come institutionalize you?
Yeah. Same kind of deal, yes.
That's super scary. So I guess where did we leave off chronologically? I mean, we're kind of jumping around, but you said...
I had just met the new friend group.
Yeah, and I think you said, and that's where it all went downhill.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I met this friend group. I liked them. They liked me. We got along really well. There was a mutual friend that introduced me, and they were pretty heavy users. Not all of them. Some of them were light users, but the main two that lived in the house that we would hang out at were pretty heavy users. And it was a mix of, well, it was really anything we could get. So sometimes it was just pills, but most of the time it was either heroin or fentanyl. So this is when I started using fentanyl, because one of our dealers, the connection that she had was for fentanyl. So obviously we preferred heroin, at least I did. Really, what I preferred the most was Opana or Dilaudid, which is hydromorphone and oxymorphone. Those were my favorites. But if we couldn't get anything else, we would get fentanyl.
Yeah, fentanyl doesn't last very long, right?
In some ways, the intense high doesn't last very long, but at least for me, the lingering effects were still decent. Yes, not as long, but it wasn't like super short.
Were you like testing your drugs? How were you sure you were getting what you thought you were getting?
We were not testing. We just really trusted our dealers because they were also friends of ours. That, I guess, is one thing that I'd like to talk a little bit about. I was very lucky that I was, not close friends, but I was friends with most of my dealers. And so they kind of, I don't want to say looked out for me because they were selling me drugs, but they would always tell me like, hey, this is fentanyl, or hey, this is really strong. You might want to only use a little bit. They were always honest with me about what it was we were getting.
Did you ever have any overdoses, or did anyone in your friend group ever have overdoses?
Yes, I had 2, and then one of my friends had one, and then another friend actually had one the day he went on methadone. He OD'd because he took a couple other substances along with the methadone.
Wow.
They were the ODs that I had. I did not go to the hospital like I probably should have, so maybe they weren't, full ODs, but they were. I was, passed out and having trouble breathing, and my friends had to keep me awake basically.
Yeah.
I think one time they did give me Narcan, but I don't remember. I just don't remember.
Yeah.
I think I heard afterwards that they gave me Narcan, but...
Yeah, I think if you're at the point where you need Narcan, you're pretty much unconscious. I know you said at some point that you felt like fuck it. Is this the part where you felt like fuck it?
Yes, not quite when I first met them, but maybe 4 or 5 months after. I had moved out of my friend's house into an apartment by myself. My dad spent a lot of time there because at this point my parents knew about the addiction. And so my mom was like, your dad has to be at the apartment with you, for a lot of the time to keep an eye on you. And it was around that time when I was starting to live in that apartment where I started just not caring at all. I was super depressed, and the only light in my life were the drugs. My will to live was so that I could get high.
Damn, that's a really fucking tragic fucking change to have experienced. Was that when your dad started drinking too? Not to make it about someone else, but...
He had always drank, but I think it was around that time where we started to see the negative effects of it.
Yeah.
He was never a heavy drinker. Even when he had a problem, it wasn't heavy drinking. It was just that every night he would have a couple, and his personality would change.
Yeah.
And it wasn't in a good way.
Yeah, I can imagine being someone's parent and being like watching them spiral downhill with IV heroin use and living in their apartment with them and then being like, well, time to put back a couple more drinks. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to talk to him. I'm not sure if that was a catalyst for him or not.
Yeah.
But he was definitely very stressed out about it. I remember he started grinding his teeth in the night around that time and showed other symptoms of being very stressed about my situation.
Yeah, super hard place for a parent to be. How long did that go on for, and when did you switch from fuck it to wanting to get off drugs again?
So let's take it a little bit slower, because around that time I also started to use meth. Not heavily, never heavily, because again, like I said before, I never really liked uppers. But it was more of, there was two things. If I couldn't get any opiates, being high on meth was better than being sober. And if I could get opiates, sometimes I'd like to do what's called speedballs or snowballs, where you inject both at once and it gives you a crazy high. So there was some meth use, but not a lot.
Were you still in the bands, and were you keeping a job, or?
I was not keeping a job at this point. I was making my money off of either music or selling drugs. And yes, I was still in bands, but it had started... I had always been able to separate my drug use from my bands, and I was high a lot of the time at shows and at practices, but it never caused problems until around this point. I was in a band that's still to this day one of my favorite bands that I've ever been in. And my drug use had gotten to a point where we started to slow down and stop playing as much because, as one of my bandmates put it, like, hey, nobody wants to be in a band with somebody who's always high on heroin.
You got called out?
Yeah.
How did it feel to get called out?
Again, I just rationalized it somehow.
Yeah.
I remember that. I don't remember exactly what was going through my mind, but I remember not being too concerned with the statement.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we need to, here's this part. So because of my anxiety, I wasn't very good about getting new needles because it always made me really anxious to walk into a pharmacy and ask for needles. So I was, at the time, reusing old needles. You're supposed to use them once and throw them away. I was not doing that. So even though I was being somewhat careful about like using an alcohol swab and everything to try to keep clean, and the reason I was doing that wasn't because I cared for my life. It was because if I died, I couldn't get high anymore. I've actually talked with my therapist about that statement before. But so even though I was decent about being clean, the reusing of the needles eventually led me to get endocarditis for the first time.
That's like a bacterial infection?
A bacterial infection in your blood that lands on your heart valves. So I got it for the first time. I immediately knew what it was because shortly before I got it, one of my friends that I used with got it. He went septic because he did not go to the hospital for days. And he got really fucked up. He's fine now, I think. I haven't talked to him in a while, but last time I heard from him, he was fine. But so I had seen him go through that, and so when I got like 104-degree fever shortly after injecting something, I was like, "Hey, Dad, we got to go to the hospital. I fucked up." So I was in the hospital for about a week on IV antibiotics. At that point, I had a friend who had access to Suboxone, so I snuck some Suboxone into the hospital so I didn't withdraw. And then after that, I said, hey, fuck this. This was too scary. It kind of made me realize, hey, maybe I do care about my life after all because of how scared I was to die from the infection.
Yeah.
And so we started shopping around for an actual Suboxone clinic shortly after that, and we found one, and I got on Suboxone. After that, I continued to use on and off for a few months. Even though I was on Suboxone, I would go off the Suboxone and go on heroin or fentanyl, and then off and on. And then after a few months, I don't know why, but one day I just was like, this isn't worth it. It's too much up and down, coming off the Suboxone, going back on opiates, and then switching. And I got tired of it. And at that point, I even had a bag of fentanyl in the apartment, and it just sat there for months, and I never touched it. At that point, I really wanted to be clean.
So it was like some combination of the moment in the hospital where you're like, oh, maybe I am kind of fighting for my life here.
Yeah.
And then also just like the pain and trauma of consistently going like through withdrawals over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And I guess in case a listener doesn't know what Suboxone is, could you explain that?
Yeah, so Suboxone is kind of like a methadone alternative. It's a partial opioid agonist. So it is an opioid, but it's very hard to abuse because it's a mix of buprenorphine and naloxone. And the naloxone kind of stops you from being able to get much out of it. What it does is it tampers the cravings and the withdrawals. And it gives you a little bit of a high, but just barely. And that goes away once you've used it consistently. And it's just a way to quit without having to go through withdrawals and without having horrible cravings all the time. And and the reason I chose it over methadone is because methadone is very hard to get off of. A lot of people are on methadone for life. Suboxone is much easier to slowly taper off of, which actually right now I'm about to start doing that.
Dang. So have you been off of drugs and on Suboxone since that time you're talking about?
For the most part. So let's get to the second time I had endocarditis, because that was really weird. So a few months after the last time I used, so the last time I used in any frequency was on Christmas Day a little over 6 years ago. And then in June I was back in the hospital. What happened was between Christmas and June, I slowly got sicker and sicker. And we weren't sure what it was. I was kind of ignoring it, due to anxiety, just like I was so afraid that it was something bad that I just wouldn't get checked out. I wouldn't go to the doctor. I skipped appointments. They wanted to do like a transesophageal echocardiogram to check my heart, and I just wouldn't go. I refused to go. I was scared. So I just kept getting sicker until eventually I developed I had a fever on and off for months, but eventually it got bad again. It got over 104. So I went to the hospital, and it turns out I had endocarditis again. But I was very confused because, hey, I haven't used IV drugs or any drugs, for that matter, in months. How is this possible? And they said probably one of the last times that I did do it, a very slow-growing bacteria that mainly lives on the skin got introduced into my bloodstream. And it wasn't an immediate, very sick. It was a slow build over months.
So there's several different kinds of bacteria that can cause endocarditis. It's not just one culprit.
Both of my endocarditis were staph, but they were different kinds of staph.
Okay. Yeah, there's MRSA and whatever. Mm-hmm.
So I was in the hospital. They did a transesophageal echo, and they found that my heart valves were completely chewed up from the bacteria. And they said, you have to have open heart surgery. We need to replace your heart valves.
That thing that you were so scared of hearing, eventually you did have to hear it.
Yes. And it was an emergency surgery. Family friend of ours who was a doctor called the hospital and was like, hey, this guy is very anxious. You need to put him on something because he'll refuse to do the surgery if he's not properly medicated. So they were giving me, I don't know what it was, but probably Xanax or something to calm me down for a few days while they prepped for the surgery. I went into the surgery, and while I was talking to the anesthesiologist right before the surgery, it was me and my dad in there, the anesthesiologist is like, well, I see they didn't take you off of the Suboxone. So because of how Suboxone works, the pain meds we give you after the surgery aren't going to have any effect until it leaves your system.
How long does it take to leave your system?
A few days.
Ay. You think while they were getting everything all sorted out that might have crossed their minds?
Yeah, I think at that point, I could be wrong about this, but I think at that point, people on Suboxone weren't all that common because the laws in Arkansas, at least, were still pretty strict about prescribing it. You had to go to an actual Suboxone clinic. You couldn't just get it from any doctor. I think the laws are different now. But so I don't think the hospital really knew much about Suboxone. But so I had the surgery. The surgery went great. There was nothing bad happened. But after the surgery, oh my God, that was the most pain I've ever been in my life.
Even worse than when you were going on and off of drugs when you were in college and you had to stay on drugs because the pain was excruciating? It was worse than that?
It was so much worse than that. My dad doesn't remember this, but I have a memory of being in the ICU after the surgery and asking my dad to kill me.
Oh, shit.
He doesn't remember that, but I have this memory of it. Maybe I just thought it and I didn't actually say it.
Or maybe he needed to forget that you said
Or maybe he needed to forget that. That's how bad the pain was. And it actually, most of it wasn't even in my chest. It was in like my shoulders. I'm not sure why. I think it's because they have to split your rib cage open to do the open heart surgery, and the rib cage hinges at your shoulders. That's my guess, but I don't know why.
God, that's fucking barbaric. Holy shit. So how long was the healing process on that before you got some relief?
So it was probably a day and a half until they were experimenting with different drugs, and they found that Dilaudid, for whatever reason, actually kind of was able to break through the Suboxone and give me not a lot, but some relief. So at that point, it was still horrible, but it was at least manageable. And then after about 3 days, the pain was pretty much gone. The pain of just lying there was pretty much gone. Still, if I tried to like move in my bed, my chest would hurt. But the pain of just lying there completely still and still having a bunch of pain, that was pretty much gone after 3 days. And at that point they were giving me Percocets and morphine. So yeah, I spent another week or a week and a half in the hospital recovering.
Did you stay on drugs after that, or did you go back on Suboxone?
I went back on Suboxone. Yeah, so I went home from the hospital, and a week or two after that, the Percocet prescription that they had given me was starting to run out. So me and my Suboxone doctor came up with a plan to switch back to Suboxone because you can't take Suboxone super soon after taking a normal opiate. It will give you what's called precipitated withdrawals. The buprenorphine in the Suboxone will knock the other opiates off of your opioid receptors and send you into a withdrawal.
Dang.
So he prescribed me some sleeping meds so that I could just take my last Percocet before I went to bed, sleep for 14 hours, and then take my Suboxone. And that's what I did, and I was back on Suboxone. And I tell you what, once I had recovered from the surgery, I felt better than I had felt in years. Because I wasn't super sick. I wasn't on drugs. I was actually healthy for the first time in years.
Yeah, what did your recovery look like after that? Yeah, you felt better. Did that, interest in staying alive, did that motivate you to change? What were your coping skills? How did you survive? If I can ask you 80 questions in a row.
Yeah. I actually probably didn't have the best coping skills at that point. I just had a very new lease on life, and that kind of kept me going for years, honestly. I was just like, hey, I'm done with that. Now I'm really going to try to make a career out of the music without the drugs and actually focus on it and not have drugs be my primary concern for once. Maybe if music is my primary concern, I can actually get somewhere with this.
I mean, sounds like music has been one of your best coping skills throughout the whole thing, like something that you're passionate about and something that's, worth living for.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I just remembered another thing about the open heart surgery. That was during COVID.
Oh, yeah.
So we had to fight hard for them to let my dad stay with me in the hospital. Basically, what I ended up saying was look, I'm not going to get any treatment if my dad can't be there with me, because that's how bad my anxiety was.
Yeah.
So they let him in. And then, also a week after I got sent home, a few days after I got sent home from the hospital after the open heart surgery, I had to go back in because it's apparently not that uncommon after an open heart surgery, but basically my chest cavity filled up with blood and it partially collapsed one of my lungs. So I had to go back in and they drained all the blood. That was kind of entertaining.
Speaking of barbaric, my goodness gracious.
So that was a thing that happened. But so I just had a whole new lease on life, and I wanted to start focusing more on music, but it was during COVID, so there was no shows happening. So
you're like, let's do a Zoom band practice.
Yeah, that doesn't really work.
No.
So I'm not sure how I got through the rest of COVID I know what it was. I started working out. I started lifting weights. I started really light because I was still recovering from the surgery, but I gradually ramped up and started lifting more and more heavy weights. That really got me through COVID. I was super interested in the sports of strongman, which is where they lift the stones and the logs, and arm wrestling. I was super into those two sports. And actually, a few years after my surgery, I started competing in arm wrestling myself.
Dang, you're like, whenever COVID lockdown's over, I'm going to arm wrestle the shit out of you motherfuckers.
Yeah. I was decent. I wasn't that good, but I was decent. And I got a lot more buff than I am currently because I haven't consistently worked out in a few years at this point. But that kind of got me through COVID. And then once COVID started winding down, the music started ramping up again, and that carried me through quite a long time. Now, if we want to talk about relapses, I've never had ever since then, I've never had a traditional relapse where you, at least according to my therapist, a real relapse is when you fall back into the pattern of using. I've had what I would call one-day relapses where I'll take a handful of hydros and then that's it. I don't use
you don't get hooked back into it.
I don't get hooked back into it.
Yeah.
So that's happened a few times.
There's a podcast I love called Recovery Elevator with Paul Churchill, and Paul Churchill calls that stuff field research. You're going back out there just to do a little bit of research and see if it still sucks. And did it still suck? Like, why didn't you get strung out again?
I think the Suboxone saved me because it was such a pain in the ass to switch from Suboxone to opiates that it just wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
Because, again, you have to wait. If you want the full euphoric effects of the opiates, you have to wait until most of the Suboxone is out of your system. It's just a pain in the ass, so it just wasn't worth it.
Take that, handful of hydros.
Yeah, so my music career started getting better and better. I started making more and more money off of it, mainly because of teaching. I started teaching drum lessons. I had taught some lessons before this, but I really started focusing on teaching lessons a few years ago. And I joined a new band. This is at this point around 3 years ago. I joined a new band that I really got along with the other people. And I loved the music they were making, and that became what is now the main band that I play with.
Are you still talking with the psychiatrist and the therapist? Is that part of your recovery?
Yes. I have switched psychiatrists and therapists since the beginning, but I still do see a psychiatrist and a therapist. And then recently, I was having really, really bad struggles with cravings for opiates.
Do you know what caused that?
I think it was multiple things. It was at a time when my band was working on building a new studio to practice at and for me to teach lessons at. Like, all my music was at our studio. We got rid of our old studio and we were working on building a new one. And so for a few months there, I didn't do any music because I didn't have a studio to do it at. I had my drum set at home and I would practice, and I would sometimes teach lessons at home, but it wasn't music every day like I was used to. So I was bored a lot of the time. And that boredom, plus a couple triggers, like an old friend of mine reaching out and saying, hey, I have hydros, do you want any? And I was watching a show, Elementary, it's a Sherlock Holmes adaptation, and there was some drug use in that. So a couple triggers plus the boredom, I think that's what led to the really, really, really bad cravings.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like I hear that boredom is, a major issue with people in recovery because you spend so much of your time like using that once you have all of that free time again, especially like it sounds like your main coping skill with the music also was reduced at that time. Mm-hmm. And then you have all this free time and you're like, well, that little wormy thought in your brain is like, you know what we could do with this free time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that's when I started. That was very recent. That's when I started going to your meetings.
Oh, cool.
A few months before that, one of my bands had played at a benefit for, I think, Recovery Demystified or for harm reduction at NWA.
Oh, no, it was for us. We had our fundraiser on 420 last year, and y'all played.
Yep, and so that's, my mom came to that, and she found out about the group. And so when I said, hey, I want to start going to a group, she was like, hey, what about this one? And so I started going, and I freaking love it. It's one of the highlights of my week every week is going to the group meetings.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I love our group meetings too. It's like such a sweet little group of people, and there's so much trust that we've built, and everyone's just like really open and gentle and kind with each other. I'm glad you found us. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it sounds like your recovery is built on loving your passion of music. Do you still do the working out, or is that sort of fallen by the wayside?
That's fallen by the wayside, but currently I'm trying to start to do it again because I do like working out. It's hard for me to stay consistent for whatever reason. I think it's still one of those ADHD autism things where if I'm not super into working out, I won't do it. Mm-hmm. Even if I still like it, I have to like be super into it to do it. Yeah.
So we've got music, we've got the prospect and past history of working out, we've got a therapist and a psychiatrist.
Recently, I've picked up chess again.
Ooh, we've got chess.
When I was a kid, I played chess tournaments and was quite good at it. I'm not nearly as good as I used to be, but I started studying and playing again. So that's definitely a coping mechanism now. Because when I play chess, it feels like it's almost meditative because it's the only thing I'm thinking about when I'm playing. So I really enjoy chess.
Sounds like hyper-focus. Very cool.
Yeah.
So then we've got renewed interest of things from childhood like chess. We've got the Recovery Demystified support group. That sounds like a pretty freaking solid foundation for lasting recovery.
Yeah.
What do you got plans for the future? Or are you just living in the present?
Yeah, so for the future, there's a few things. I really want to keep furthering my music career. I'm still not making enough money off of it to live completely on that. So I need to get more students and have more success with the bands that I'm in. But it looks like both of those things are happening. I'm slowly but surely getting more and more students. And my bands are... I know it's not a ton compared to like famous bands, but for example, the main band that I play with released an album in July, and now it's over 35,000 streams on Spotify.
Damn.
So we're getting somewhere.
Is that the band that you did the Tiny Desk performance with?
Yes.
And you won that, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah, I could talk about that. So we entered the Tiny Desk contest. And we didn't win the national one, but we were one of the winners for the Arkansas entrance. So we played a showcase in Little Rock and got paid pretty well for it.
Hell yeah. That's super cool. Sounds like you're coming on up. Mm-hmm. Was there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
Yes, I thought of one thing. The importance of, well, a couple things actually. One is the importance of harm reduction. My mom did not understand the concept of harm reduction for a long time. And so, for example, every time she would find needles in the apartment, she'd take them and throw them out and stuff like that. And I don't blame her for that because she just didn't get it. It's honestly the first thing you think when you see your son with needles is, yeah, let's get rid of him. Mm-hmm. So, it was still totally my fault. But if she had maybe helped me get clean needles, or I know that's a really hard thing for a parent to do, but I think that's what should be done. So if any listeners have a loved one that is in an addiction, harm reduction is key. They'll quit when they're ready to quit. In the meantime, make sure that they don't die.
Yeah. Yeah, it's important to keep people alive until they're ready to make the switch. And it's not enabling, it's just like safety issues. Like, you almost died from a fucking blood and heart infection. Overdoses are so fucking common, especially with fentanyl and everything. So, yeah, like always learning how to administer naloxone, helping folks get clean injection supplies and fentanyl test strips. That is going to keep your loved one alive until they're ready, just like you said. Yeah, super important. Thanks for bringing that up.
Another thing I wanted to bring up that I, for some reason, forgot to mention when I was telling the part of the story is that I had a very unusual situation with quitting. So another catalyst of me quitting, in addition to the endocarditis for the first time, was that friend group that I used with. They all started getting clean. They started going on methadone. They started, a few of them just quit cold turkey. A few of them went on methadone. One of them passed away. Another one went to jail. 2 went to jail. But aside from the tragedy, most of them ended up quitting. And that was a huge inspiration to me. Like, man, if they can quit, maybe I can too. So once I had the endocarditis, I was like, I don't want to be using anymore. And I'm not scared to quit because I've seen them quit and I know it's possible.
Totally.
So for me, it was kind of the opposite of usually you want to cut out all your old friends that you used with, at least for the time being, and it's a bad influence to be around them. For me, they were a great influence at that time.
They're an inspiration.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess, go ahead.
That also leads me to my main point, which is that addicts are humans. Like, a lot of people have this really kind of gross view of addicts. Like, oh, he's just a junkie. Make sure to keep my kids away from him. He's a bad person. And that's not really the reality. Addicts are humans that are having a really tough time. And they still deserve, love and support.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like someone with a severe IV heroin addiction is a person who's like experienced a lot of suffering. Like, no one gets to that point because their entire life was awesome. No one wakes up one day and is like, I want to grow up to just be an IV heroin user. Like, these are people that have had bad things happen to them when they were children, or like chronic pain issues like you were talking about, or chronic mental health issues. And when you hear that experience of someone like discovering a drug that makes all of that stuff go away, like, of course they're going to continue to use it. And yeah, people are like complex human beings who've like been through some fucked up shit. And if they found a way to survive and the way to survive was drug use, it doesn't make them a bad person. It's like, just like you said, people that are using drugs deserve love, compassion, healthcare, friendship.
Yes, definitely healthcare.
Yeah, they deserve all of like the decency and dignity that we afford to people that are not on drugs. So I'm glad you said that. I also wanted to bring up too, when we were talking about harm reduction, I forgot to say that Suboxone itself is harm reduction. And when we view addiction recovery from like a purity standpoint, like it's like all or nothing, like you have to be completely like clean and sober and not on anything to be like truly recovered. I think that like fuck that purity bullshit, and the harm reduction of things like methadone or Suboxone are just like amazingly valid, life-saving medication.
Yeah, I might have gotten back on the horse if it wasn't for the Suboxone making it a pain in the ass to take real opiates. Now I'm about to start tapering off of the Suboxone. I'm scared, but I think I'm in a place where even if I can use opiates again, I don't think I will. Unless they're prescribed for medical reasons. And even in that case, what I'd probably do is have my parents hold the bottle and just give me one a day so that I don't
even have the temptation to abuse them.
Yeah. And I mean, it sounds like your recovery is super strong. Like, you've got the zest for life, and you've rediscovered all of these, like, hobbies and interests that really make your life feel really full.
Yeah, there's another hobby that I just got back into, actually, from my childhood. I mentioned it earlier in the show, but I used to yo-yo. And I recently, a few weeks ago, I bought a new yo-yo and started trying to pick that back up.
Hell yeah. I think you're going to do fucking awesome off of Suboxone. I think you're about to, open up a whole new world for yourself. So I usually end with 2 questions. One is, what do you think people don't understand about addiction?
That's kind of a tough one because I think it depends on the person. I would say quite a lot of people have experienced addiction, even if it's not themselves, they have a loved one that's experienced it. So a lot of people have experiences with addiction, and every experience with addiction is different. So I think what people don't understand about it varies depending on the person. But on a broad scale, people that have not experienced addiction or have had their loved ones experience addiction, I think it just goes back to my main point that we're still human. We still deserve medical care, love, friendship, compassion. Yeah.
Absolutely. If you could speak to someone in the darkest days of their addiction, what would you say to them?
That's another tough one because, at least from my experience, you can't get clean unless you want to. So having somebody else tell you that you should get clean rarely helps from my experience. So what I would tell them, I think, is just try to be safe. Like, you might not care about your life right now, but if you do get clean, you will care about your life. And you don't want to have these lasting repercussions like I have. Like, I have artificial heart valves. I have to take blood thinners every day and get my blood thickness level checked every week at the hospital. Like, you don't want to have these lasting repercussions that will be with you your whole life. So try to be safe.
Yeah. You deserve being safe, even just like the whole theme of exactly what we're saying. Like, folks that use drugs still deserve dignity, and safety is part of that. So thank you for saying that. All right. Well, thanks for your time today. It's been really nice to be able to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Recovery Demystified. If you like what you heard, share it with a friend or rate and review us so we can reach a larger audience. Recovery Demystified is produced and edited by me, Early Brunner. Stevie Petet made our logo. Our beautiful theme music is by Logan Bragg. And our social media manager is Kaylee Bausch. We are entirely supported by your generous donations as a 501c3 nonprofit. You can find a link to donate in the description. May you be happy and free, dear listener.